So Marcus, when we were just discussing what to talk about, you asked me how I was and I asked you how I was, and I responded with a less conventional answer, because I said, actually, it's interesting because there's a few things happening right now that are triggering me right now. And what I didn't say, but now we're talking now, is actually when I say triggering me, just to be really clear in my communication, there are a few things that are actually triggering anger in me. So then this is now opening up a conversation about the links between authentic responses, authentic conversation, in response to that really common question, how are you? And what is an effective way of responding, and how that links to compassion and authenticity. So over to you really on that.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to ask people how they're doing throughout the day, and certainly talk to dozens of people, and your standard canned response of, you're all right. And again, as many people, say that you can tell from body language and other things that it's probably not the case, but making people feel comfortable in sharing if it isn't okay, and things that aren't going particularly well. Because, as people are returning to work, and obviously a lot of stuff going on, people probably want to talk about both in their own personal lives and just going on in society. You have to be able to listen and not just, move on to the next thing once you ask that sort of question. Pause a moment and try to be, genuine in that interest of how they're doing and what's going on with them.
Yeah, and of course, if people have the courage, if you like, because I think it takes some courage, and it took me a little bit of courage to tell you my truth in this moment. And I do believe it does take courage to step outside the norm and say, actually, the stuff happening, or in this moment, there's not there's not some feeling great. Although interestingly enough, in simply expressing to you my truth, my authenticity, I'm noticing within my system there's a kind of returning to center and feeling more grounded and more connected and more present, and that the triggering experiences are very, very quickly passing. So that in itself is an interesting piece. So my question for us both is how we can, and this is, as I was saying, it's about a world culture change, not just a corporate culture change. How we, if we care about this, I know I do, and I have done for years, how we can encourage the world to respond to the question, how are you, in a way that's truthful, and the value of that. So the step one is, can we respond in a truthful way? And of course, if people do come out and say their truth, how we can support them. But the step one is, let's respond in a truthful way. And yes, of course, sometimes we can tell, but sometimes many people are very clever, or not, at hiding how they are. So wonder what you thought.
Having dealt with people for, a couple decades, as people feel comfortable with the team, their environment, be it friends, family, work, whatever, they're more likely to sit there and share those things. But in order to get to that point, we can't judge people. We cannot we need to actively, attentively listen to what they're saying. And the answer isn't trying to solve their problems necessarily. It's listening to what those issues are that are important to them. Can we mirror that a little bit with some of our own personal experiences? Sure, but again, we're also not trying to take away from the importance of their part of the story. It's really important to listen, to see that we are, and sometimes repeating back some of those things, to summarize back, okay, here's what I've heard. And again, that you've actively listened, you've processed what they've said, and you've paraphrased it back to them. It means a lot.
Absolutely, the listening piece. And as you're talking, what's coming up for me is the notion is for the senior leaders in organizations to start responding to the question, how are you, authentically? And that is a way, cultural change tends to start from the top. So even though we do live in a culture where the conventional canned answer is, yes, fine, great, how are you? If we can encourage our senior leaders to respond with their authentic response. So yes, in this part of my life, I'm feeling great, but there are some other areas in my life where I'm feeling quite sad or quite angry or scared. Then we really start to get into the real authentic communication of the human being. We really start to connect people. We build connections, and we support people in their mental health, because then they're starting to come out as human beings and be their human selves, rather than just presenting as a packaged, if you like, Walt Disney version of themselves, which is not going to be supportive of either connection or mental health.
No, and it has to be genuine in how they take their approach as well. You can't go from never sharing anything about yourself in your, I don't know, in a meeting or a group or whatever setting or individual discussion, and it needs to be kind of rolled out over time. You can't just do it on that first meeting and just, it seems disingenuous. It seems the person who is on the other end of that just probably is going to be taken well off guard. They have to kind of, build up that, but actually genuinely share some stuff. Obviously, we don't want to overshare stuff, certainly on either side of the table there initially, because again, if it hasn't been done before, again, it may make one or both parties uncomfortable. And the whole point of it is to have a setting where they can share those. So, it has to be done in again, a genuine fashion.
Yes, and the piece about oversharing is very valid. And again, as you're talking, I'm sort of reflecting on, if an organization wants to go down this route and really wants to really embrace this notion, there's a number of ways of doing it. One is simply to start coming out and sharing a little bit more about how each leader is truly feeling. Another is to actually sort of, if you like, promote the notion in advance that we have researched this notion, the value of it, and the benefits for all of us in terms of connection with each other and our mental health. And we're going to lead the way by starting to answer the question, how are you, from a more authentic, real place. So that's the culture that we want to create, if we do, and we're going to start to do that, and we're going to encourage you to do that. And how does that land for people? And maybe there's a conversation around, is that, how do people feel about that notion before they even get into it? So that in itself could be another interesting conversation.
Yes, it could. It is one of those things where I think a lot of companies, individuals, leaders are looking at how they can do things better, and how do you, that genuineness is what people look for. And it's interesting that sometimes through trials and tribulations, you get closer to one another than if everything was great and you just responded that way each day, that everything is fine. Through some of that strife does build bonds, be it with the individual and with the team. So it's important to do that for everyone's benefit.
Yes, and I'm really pleased we've had this conversation. I'm finding myself feeling quite excited about this notion and being a catalyst, if you like, to introduce this notion into the world, into organizations and beyond that, because I totally believe in the benefits of it. So it's really great that we have, and I'm really looking forward to when we next speak about something. Thanks so much, Marcus.
Thanks, Karen. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.